This is George Sanger. I gave this talk as the closing keynote for the Audio Engineering Society's first conference on audio for virtual and augmented realities, or AVAR. October 1st, 2016. Did anybody meet any smart people at this conference? Hands, please. Did anybody attend a talk at which the state of audio for mixed realities and virtual realities was compared to a Wild West? I think that between this conference and the Game Sound Con that I just came from, I went to about 5 talks that started with that. I want to thank Charles Deenan and Linda Gedimer for inviting me to speak at this very historic event. It's a deep honor. The first conference of its kind for audio on the new realities. We advise young people, fill your pockets with keys, because you're going to go on a journey of life and you will encounter a lot of doors, and you want to open those doors with those keys. And right now, after these conferences, I'm feeling more like we're filling our pockets with tanks. I'm not sure what kind of doors we're going to open with those tanks. It matters what you do with the tank. So this talk is maybe a little sanity check to make sure that we've thought about bringing some kind of a compass as well on our journey of life, and also that we're not so dug into this very worthy question of how to make things spatially realistic that we lose our perspective on the whole thing. Now, my name is George Sanger. I have been in the past known as the Fat Man, legendary game audio guru. At present, I am the director of Sonic Arts at a company called Magic Leap. Magic Leap does mixed reality. We're inventing the future. We're destroying the impossible. I'm mostly going to stick to mixed reality in this talk because it's the most fun, it's the most powerful, it's what I'm doing right now. Now, in a recent cover story, Wired magazine referred to Magic Leap as the world's most exciting startup, and also in the same breath as the world's most secretive startup. Now, you in the audience are audio engineers, and presumably as engineers you like facts. But it is the end of this conference, and enough is enough, which works really well with this director kind of brain that I have too. So in this talk, we're going to deal with the currents and the tides. I can't keep track of all those little waves anyway. Now, you all know that feeling of being at the cutting edge, right? At some point or another, you've done something that's been kind of advanced, and it's felt good and right to you, and there's a feel to it. You look around you and you say, oh, wait a minute, other people haven't quite caught up with this yet. This is me in that state 32 years ago, and in this video I am in the process of amazing the convention crowd by manipulating pixels that are the size of small dogs, and I'm hanging it out there predicting that there is a future for computers in the area of art. It was the Wild West, and I'm calling for a revolution.
The rising star people are the young rebels here. In an industry dominated by giants and catering to large interests, they're trying to make computers usable by ordinary people.
The same. Every bit of it is set up in what we call a stabilized architecture.
Valdocs version 2 is a new kind of personal tool for the information age. It combines 11 separate functions: word processing, a spreadsheet, graphics, mail, even a color painting system.
The artists I've talked to think that this has kind of revolutionized the world of art. So you're in a good department. It's going to be, the revolution is here.
Wow. Wow.
Now I want to do some detail work. Now how close do I want to go? Well, let's see. Quite pick the pixel that I want. Maybe right about there. And shrink the paintbrush down. Yeah, description.
That's fun.
It's got the paint program, it's got a drafting program, which talk to each other. You can draft a picture, paint it in.
Now, some of you have been there, right? One little compass-related tip: the way that I identify the path that the universe is trying to lay out for me, when the universe is saying, yes, This is where you need to be. I get this feeling that I like to pay attention to, which is that I feel like I'm sitting up in bed in the middle of the night and I'm going, oh my gosh, I've got to do this. Or, I spit out my coffee. Those are auspicious signs. Pay attention to that universe. Don't say no to the muses. So how did this feel to me in 1984? It felt like we were talking absolute science fiction. It felt like we were the kings and queens of the world. We were on top of everything. And what was really important to us was enabling people and encouraging creativity. Well, guess what? We are going there again. So let's do this. And this is so not Be Here Now. I can just picture Ram Dass saying, no, you can't do this. Let's remember 20 years ago when we were predicting things around 1996 or so. And let's think about what's it like looking back on that now. And then together we'll make a few predictions. And then we'll travel to 2036 and we will remember what it was like today when we predicted the next 20 years. And then we'll draw some very rough conclusions. And then we will get together here in 20 years and laugh about who got it wrong and right. Now, history being what it is, it's like seeing formations in a cloud, seeing things in a Rorschach test. When I look back at the ink blot of my lifetime, I see, or at least I saw when I was prepping for this talk, these a sawtooth wave. And each tooth is comprised of something that was very interesting to me and might be interesting to you also as audio engineers. So what fascinated me about this first period here from 56 to 76 was the growth of pop music. Now, the bottom of the chart, the y-axis, the bottom is nothing and the top is everything. So pop music kind of went from nothing to everything over 20 years. The second sawtooth, who owns their own computer? And the third one is audio hardware and software capabilities. And the fourth is audio for mixed reality, where we're just starting. Now, my perspective is skewed because this is how my lifetime plays out over this period. I grew up in that first sawtooth and I was learning things. In the second sawtooth, I was kind of trying to get onto the playing field. And in the third sawtooth, I got in the game. And maybe in that fourth sawtooth, the current one, maybe I'm coaching. So maybe your life is indexed over. Maybe you're interested in the pop music of 76 and the tools of 96. It still works. Just look at it through your eyes and see what it tells you. Now, this is a close-up of the first two sawteeth, popular music on the left and who owns personal computers on the right. Going further to the left side, there's Disneyland, started in 1955. There is something about Disney that stretches across all 80 years. It's a constant, shining, almost unchanging light. I can't really put my finger on it. Maybe it's because of the songs. Maybe it's because of the way that Disney makes us feel. Maybe it's because of how they inspire us. But I always see it as being like really close to everything all the time. Look at the Beach Boys' career. Pretty much a 4-year run. In 1962, they put out their first album, Surfin' Safari. It had songs on it like The Shift, which was sort of a pun about a dress and a transmission because they're both a shift. It had a tune called 10 Little Indians. The first little Indian caught a curl. The second little Indian kissed a girl, whatever. And they went from that in 4 years to Good Vibrations. The Beatles in the same 4 years went from Please Please Me to Revolver. Wow. And as an audio engineer, you should know about Revolver, and you should know that Jeff Emmerich, on his first day as a full recording engineer, had the gig of recording Tomorrow Never Knows for the Revolver album. And he did maybe 3 things during that session that revolutionized the way that we listen to music and record music. The first that kind of springs to mind is that he moved the microphone a few inches closer to the bass drum. He got in huge trouble for it, and at the same time, it changed how we record bass drums and how we listen to pop music. He also ran John's voice through a Leslie, and he manipulated a bunch of tape loops. It's really interesting. You should learn about it if you're a recording engineer. Now, if you think about what happened to the Beach Boys' career after 1966, it's nuts. If you think about what's happening with other bands, the Beatles, if you think about what's happening socially, historically, technologically, that period was a really wild, artistic, revolutionary time. When you go to the right, now I'm talking about something a little bit more linear. And I think that the reason that I chose who had their own computer as the sawtooth here is because I was very interested in what tools were available to me during that period of my life that would allow me to aspire to do the wonderful, great things that Disney, the Beatles, the Beach Boys were doing in the previous 20 years. So you can see it went from some smart guy somewhere had his own computer, and then later you found out that some doctor that you knew about had bought one because he wanted people to know that he could afford it. And then around 1983, I got my computer. More and more people got computers until eventually everybody got computers. Other tools were becoming available during that period. It made a huge difference to me that the ADAT appeared, making multitrack recording suddenly available to me. And not just multitrack, but as many tracks as I wanted, very affordable, and digital to boot. Also making a huge difference. Somehow, I have this sense that at the beginning, around 1976, electric guitars were kind of hard to find and amplifiers were kind of exotic. And by the end of this period, we were all getting musicians' friend catalogs in the mail faster than we could read them, and you just couldn't get away from the availability of the tools to make rock and roll. Now, if you look at the next two teeth, on the left, audio hardware and software, and on the right, audio for mixed reality, and us smack in the middle. Now, 20 years ago, nothing. We were just getting sound cards, and now everything. The entire studio is on the computer. This is another sort of well-behaved revolution. It is a revolution because a lot of people got enabled, they got smarter, they got more creative. Right now, we are near nothing. It's the Wild West, and the next 20 years are going to be intense. It's going to be an explosion. So let's go back to then, the left side of this slide. Time travel effect. 20 years ago, what were your predictions back then? What evolutions, what revolutions did you help along? What did you get swept up in? How did it feel? What was important? And if you don't go back 20 years, what were your predictions last month, 2 years ago, 5 years ago? This is about you, really. Now, this is the young pre-internet fat man who thought he was the only game in town. And I apologize for this. The only story that I really studied is the story of George Sanger and the Fat Man. It's the only one I have the video of. But the goal here is for this to be a tool for you. Think about what your life of predictions was like then and identify the feelings that guided you and be ready to deal with those feelings in our next 20-year wave. So anyway, here's what the Fat Man's life was like in 1996.
It's going to sound like movies. Why wouldn't it? Every year the technology makes it just a little bit easier to do that. Now we have to invent a new art form, which would be two new art forms. One is composing interactively, and the other one is the music integrator, who would be a person who would take music that's composed non-interactively by the composers and help them assemble it into the programming environment so that it makes musical sense with an interactive product. So sound quality is going to be infinite, just as it is now in movies. That's easy to see. It's just a question of when.
And by the way, if you were paying attention 20 years ago to when I think maybe coined the word just then, and if you became an integrator, let me know, please, because as foretold, I've just gotten to where I might be able to hire one. Now, jumping around a bit, remember, this is the world we'd been handed in 91. MPC, CD-ROMs, we were just trying to get the computers to work and play our sounds. We called it the $0 billion industry. We tried calling it multimedia, which in decades earlier meant a record player and a slide projector. And the record player would do the audio, and every once in a while the record player would go boop, and you would change the slide. So pretty much like PowerPoint. Wikipedia says that this standard never really caught on, and that it's still to this day hard to know if your computer is going to be able to play the game that you want to buy. The audio component of MPC was the glorious enabling technology of 8-bit 22K mono, which really was beautiful and freeing in a grainy, dull, convenient, linear sort of way, because we could now record real instruments, whatever that means. On the other hand, just as MIDI was getting interesting and interactive and versatile and turning into general MIDI, it went out of fashion for a bit. So I'm a big MIDI fan. It's elegant, it's balanced, it's open, it's pretty clear about what it does and what it doesn't do. But before MIDI and audio became the best friends forever that they are now, it wasn't actually really clear which was the better technology to roll with. So I bring that up because maybe it reminds you of certain conferences that you may have been to lately. Certain Wild Westy things. Here is one of the early non-MIDI, very MPC, voice and music-driven games. It's a special one for me because my younger daughter actually cares about this one because her friends can sing the song I'm about to play for you. 20 years ago, the developers of this game asked me for a little rhyming song. They sent me some lyrics. I rewrote the lyrics into a whole big thing. I sent them back the challenge. You are going to turn this into the first music video ever in a game. They went for it very graciously. Now remember, this is a time when there were no video game music fans. There was barely video game music, and a music video in a game was a pretty bold futuristic prediction in 8-bit 22K mono.
We are the topiary creatures. We're very pleased to meet you, senors and senoritas too. The animals we feature, you know, would never eat you. We sing so very sweet to you. Welcome to the zoo, zoo, with the kangaroos, and the tigers too. Welcome to the zoo.
Now, furthermore, in this bizarre primitive art form that nobody cared about, there's a prediction that I planted for us 20 years ago so that we could be amused today. In some versions, like this 16-bit mix, which makes a helpful A/B ear training for you engineers, was this prognostication about the value of game audio to the coming generation.
We are the topiary creatures.
We're early multimedia.
So our lips don't have to move exact. But our director, Sammy,
Says we could win a Grammy!
if we let you interact.
Welcome to the zoo, with the kangaroos.
So by that time, I had become the first person accepted into the Academy on the basis of recordings that I'd made for CD-ROM as opposed to vinyl or tape or a film. And I had also tried to get them to put in a Grammy category for game audio. Tried very lamely. And after this, several years, Chance Thomas put together a committee, and they very competently, through hard work and beautiful cooperation skills, accomplished getting a game audio category put in for a Grammy. So you can get a Grammy for game audio now, as humorously predicted, for your benefit. Now, jumping over to MIDI, 1993, the first CD-ROM game to sell more than 40,000 copies. It sold 1.5 million copies right out of the gate. It was the first general MIDI game, and there was only one general MIDI sound card. So I went for it. I hung it out there. I wrote 4 pages predicting that general MIDI would support sound cards that hadn't even been created yet. And these 4 pages actually got into the manual that you see there in the picture. Now, eventually after this, a bunch of general MIDI cards did show up, but they didn't play this music back well at all. It sounded really bad. So that led to a whole different adventure. in which I tried to rectify that situation by creating a company called Fat Labs, which would test the sound cards. That created some friction. It led to community involvement, attempting to set up some standards, a lot of very rewarding and cherished relationships with many of you in the audience. And through this, I also personally experienced some of you at the cutting edge of this sawtooth wave of technology. Let me explain that. Around that time, I was asked about the future of sound cards, mainly General MIDI, and I couldn't answer the question. And I thought about how someone would have to be an expert at audio and games and cutting-edge technology and marketing and electronics, and I realized none of the smart people that I knew could answer the question by themselves. So we realized a group brain was needed, and we started a small elite think tank in Texas, which had a lot of influence. Remember, the state of the art at that time was a hodgepodge of hardware and software. It was better at crashing computers than making sound. The engineers asked the creatives, what is it that you want? And the creatives said, we want a 24-track recording studio's capabilities in the computer box. And if we get to that, we'll be able to do what we need to do. So at this point in time, we can look back on that and nod sagely and say that was the call that we made, and it has come to pass. These guys really saw it coming. Now, note that that last bullet is kind of interesting. The first 2 years of Project Barbecue, we not only didn't have internet, we didn't have cell phones, we actually only had one landline in the office of the ranch that wasn't capable of running internet. So that was the atmosphere in which this work was done. All of these calls were pretty outrageous, and they all pretty much came true. And that was just the first year. It's in year 21 this month. And actually, the day that I'm recording this, it's the first day of Barbecue 2016. Team Fat. This was my team of cowboy composers for many years. They were my best friends. They were my band. We were compadres, all for one, one for all, on a cattle drive through the aforementioned Wild West. And we noticed that multimedia and the internet were kind of a funny pair of technologies arising and making our motherboards obsolete every few months. So we decided to stick a flag in the ground, claim it as our playground, and sort of declare our own guidelines as to how we would approach this. Those guidelines took the form of the Manifesto. Multimedia is a frontier for music. Blah, 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 historically significant, opportunities for different new ways, interacting with music, settlers coming to the frontier, pioneers needing to make sure that it becomes free, open, musical, intention, expressive, touching, human spirit, not repetitive, not laden, enslaved by styles or imposed fashion. Anyway, it was a beautiful thing. Signed by Team Fat, 1995. How did it feel? Nailed it. So again, that was the George story, but turn it back to you. Your predictions. How did it feel? It felt like we were talking crazy science fiction. It felt like we were rulers of the world. We sat up in bed, we spit out our coffee, and there was a revolution in possibilities. What seemed to matter was making life bigger and helping people to be better and smarter and more creative. Now, to come clean, I don't really know the future. And you've all been to more audio engineering for VR conferences than I had when I wrote this, because this is the first one. So don't just listen passively to my intentionally sketchy predictions. Go for your own better opinions. I really want to paint a landscape that you can make your own predictions in. 20 years in the future, it's way out there, so let's go crazy. And remember, I'm interested in mixed reality, and I base my predictions on this. Virtually everybody will wear A lightweight portable device of some kind every day, all day. The computer stuff that we do these days and a lot more is going to be seamlessly integrated into their daily lives. Now, this is a whole new way of dealing with computers. You're surrounded in your daily life by computer objects and interface objects, and your digital world knows about your physical world and vice versa. Now, some of that may seem pretty far out here in 2016, but how's it going to seem in 2036? Maybe kind of commonplace. So this is what I believe. You have to chart your own course. So in your own mind, just decide if you're going to go along with the predictions that I'm going to make based on these assumptions. Now, here's an easy prediction about passive entertainment in mixed reality. Nobody is going to complain ever again about the good old days of 12-inch album jackets based on the artwork. If you look at integrated audiovisual experiences, even that we're having now, and extrapolate that into what we're going to be seeing in 20 years, and it's obviously going to be mind-blowing. And if you start thinking about integrated audiovisual music experiences and digital objects, this is going to have some effect on people's desire for ownership of physical biscuits. I know people who are young people who still want to own CDs, even though they can get digital music. They want to own an object, what a friend of mine calls a biscuit. And when you start getting into these digital audio objects, you start thinking about, well, what about musical instruments? What about control surfaces? And you don't know what's going to be cool in 20 years, what people are going to want. The question is, are people going to want more or fewer of these things? And now I'm going to make a prediction. I think it's going to be like synthesizers. Some years it's very cool to have a bunch of knobs and physical synths, and some years it's cool to just have everything be virtual on the computer. I think, this is my half-court shot, this is kind of a bar bet, not really serious, but I think that there's going to be a pendular motion. I think every 2 years, let's say, everyone's going to want virtual digital objects, and every 2 years people are going to want physical representations of those objects that they can play with in conjunction with their device. Now, did I say control surfaces? George, that's not passive experiences, that's active experiences, maybe even creative experiences. All right, let's go to the next slide. Boop! Yes, you will make music and sound using this kind of device, especially if you're in the business of making music. And this also goes for other professionals who make things, like artists. I'm predicting the art revolution again. But it will also apply to people whose job it is not to make music and whose job it is not to make art. And it will fall to us, the professionals, to make the tools that allow them to make their art and music, which makes an interesting question as to who is the author of an experience and who's the artist who's making the art in the experience, which gives me also an excuse to show another little piece of George Predicts from a few years ago. We will be composing environments. People who play the games will actually be creating pieces of music. They are, the piece that we write is the work of art. The person who performs it, in a way, participates in the art. So we're not writing songs, we're not writing music anymore. We're writing these playgrounds in which someone can come and be a performer. So creativity and possibilities are going to explode. They're going to redefine themselves and nest one in another. You won't just make music, you'll make instruments. You'll make concerts that other people can put on. You will make bands that people can lead. You'll make tools that help other people make bands that people can lead, and tools to make those tools, and tools for that. And did that just happen? Oh my gosh, I just blew your mind. You're welcome. The lightweight device that everybody is going to wear all the time is going to have audio in and audio out. All day long, some portion of your audio input and audio output are going to come and go between you and the real world, and some portion is going to come and go to a digital world that knows about your physical world, and the combination of the two worlds creates a relationship with audio, the likes of which we've only begun to conceptualize. So that prediction leads to questions for you about what does that mean to creativity, entertainment, education, safety, navigation, access to information. And don't tell anybody outside of this audio engineering room, but these are audio apps and audio issues. And there's going to be amazing growth in this little corner when people start thinking about how to combine that with whatever sensors might be on a device. Now, it's also easy to predict that this is going to be a new generation that's comfortable with these devices. And there's going to be a new vocabulary that's going to emerge. Now, in some senses, I mean, yes, the kind of vocabulary that like when the first surfers started saying, toes on the nose and hang 10 and cowabunga. Yes, that kind of vocabulary is going to come up. But also, there's going to be vocabularies that's similar to the filmic vocabulary. In other words, what's our equivalent of the close-up going to be? How do we direct people's attention in mixed reality? How do we do a smash cut? How do we do a montage? And from an audio standpoint, what does background music sound like when you're walking around in the world? Is it stereo? Is it surround? Is it placed in the world? Is it attached to a screen that follows you around and the sound comes from the screen? Is it coming from virtual speakers that follow you around? When do interface instructions or cues come from a button in the middle of the air that you're supposed to push? And when are they just like a non-spatialized voice in your head? Push the button. And then there's another kind of vocabulary, sort of a gestural vocabulary. There are some people who think that when our Olympic team walked out into the arena, that they all had their cell phones out and they were videoing it. And some of us think that they were missing the great moments of their lives because they were on a device. And they think that when we get our new hands-free devices, that won't be a problem any longer. And I'm not sure that I see it that way. I agree that that's kind of a problem, but I think that this is an example of a gestural vocabulary. I think that those were young people who were showing the world that they were enjoying this moment so much that they're saying with their hands up in the air, with holding a cell phone, they're saying to the world, I value this moment enough that I might watch it later. But there's no way. They're not going to watch that again. Not a chance. They're just sending a message. And it's in a vocabulary that they sort of own and other people kind of don't get. Now, this gets me thinking about the ultimate interface for our devices. Let's say that we refine how you communicate to your lightweight device to the ultimate degree. So there is no way that you can tell that I am in communication with my device, in communication with somebody on my device, telling it to do something, listening to it. So that's, I'm typing with my toes maybe, or I'm sending mental signals. But 20 years from now, it's to the point where you can't tell what I'm doing. Okay, so now, how do I let you know that I'm taking pictures? And I think it's going to go like this. I think that people are going to hold up their pinky and thumb to their ear and say, excuse me, I'm in a call right now. I'm talking to someone. Or they're going to hold up the little cranking camera in front of their faces and say, oh, look, I'm taking video. Or they're going to hold up their hand and look at it so they can let you know that they're writing email. And all of these ridiculous gestures, which seem stupid to us from now, in 2036 are going to seem like super normal. And how could anyone have thought that those were ridiculous gestures? So that's my prediction. We'll find out in a short number of years. A new type of audio professional has emerged, and I think our description, audio generalist, will catch on, at least for a while. Now, there was a time when there was such a thing as a professional bass drummer, and then someone invented the trap kit, which meant that either the bass drummer or the snare drummer or the cymbal player, whoever was cheapest, I guess, now was the person who played the bass drum, the cymbal, and the snare. When I was doing MIDI for games heavily, I realized that I was doing sort of the job of John, Paul, George, Ringo, Jeff Emerick, and George Martin as well. It gets even more intense as we look at the job requirements for an audio generalist, because you have to do the music everything, you have to do the sound design everything, you have to do the integration of the audio into an interactive context, you have to do the spatialization of the audio into a spatial context, and it's really good if you can do scripting, and it's even a bonus if you can do code. So yeah, there will be a certain amount of specialization in that area. I have to distinguish that from spatialization. But the generalist will be a very useful job description. Along similar lines, there's new requirements for audio, magic audio, I call it. One of the things that you hear a lot about right now is the real convincing spatialization requirement for audio. It needs to be able to convince you that it's there and that it's real. That is a very small part of what's fun and engaging and interesting about a new reality experience. You not only have to be realistic, you have to follow the intent of the rest of the experience. And that means you have to be supportive of fun. If it's supposed to be a fun experience, it has to be instructive and clear if that's the kind of experience it is. Is it exciting? Is it scary? Is it soothing? These are very different from realistic. Is it heartfelt? Is it making your day better? On top of intent, I didn't include here on the slide, but it's also nice to me to have the audio be interactive and to have it be reactive is a bonus. Generative is very helpful in some situations, and I also happen to like songs. In fact, here's a lyric about spatialization and the rest of Magic Audio, and it goes like this, quote, "I hear where you're coming from, and I like where it's going," unquote. Now here's the sort of caveat slide. There will be things that we in 2016 assume will be important in 2036 that won't be, and vice versa, things that we assume won't be important that will be. Also, there are things that we think will be possible now, but that by the time we get there won't be, and vice versa. So you got things like, we used to think that the flying cars were going to happen, the robot slaves, but some of those things just aren't going to happen, and it won't be what we expect. Now, keep in mind that nobody anticipated texting on smartphones. Note the audio importance of this. Here you've got a device that's built to do audio, and people are barely using it for audio. They're using it to bang on as fast as they can with their thumbs. Nobody saw that coming. Now, there will be killer apps that we absolutely didn't see coming. Literally, because many of those will be audio-based, and some of them will be audio only. At Project Barbecue, we had a good laugh when we heard about the MIDI-enabled microwave oven. We had a good laugh about the internet-ready refrigerator. They sounded ridiculous, but now we've got the Internet of Things, and you've got to be very serious about the Internet of Things. Our devices are already talking to our homes. They're certainly going to continue to do that and do it better and better as the next 20 years comes. So, as Oracle, I'm going to predict that every bad, totally stupid idea that you've heard at this conference or at the last conference or from your relatives is actually going to turn into a billion-dollar killer app idea, and you need to invest in that now. So, when I ask you, or you ask me, what's the future of audio for mixed reality, it's also easy to predict that no one person can get his head around the audio for MR space. Many of the 20-year solutions are going to come from groups, communities, everybody working together, or they're going to spring in tiny pieces simultaneously all around the world from multiple sources, and then they'll be brought together by who knows what kind of group or network. Maybe it'll start with this conference. Maybe it'll start with the people in this room. Maybe it will start with the people who are listening to the recording that I will make a few days after I talk to you people in this room. Boy, I am so not in the now right now. So it's not just about the hardware or software this time. It's about audio's role in new realities. It's going to happen. And once a few hundred or a few thousand developers get a hold of this stuff, you're going to see some incredibly wonderful things. Time travel transition. Okay, now we're in 2036. How did it feel to you when you were making your predictions 20 years ago? So we're looking back on today, on that 2016 conference, on that talk, on when you listened to this recording so long ago. And there was a revolution in possibilities. And it felt like we were in crazy science fiction land. And it felt like we were kings of the world and the coffee spitting thing. And what seemed to matter was making life bigger and helping people to be better, smarter, and more creative. Conclusion. Here's a little songwriter sketch about mixed reality.
As it was always there before. Experience beyond your wildest dreams. Wishing wells and robot wars and yellow submarines. Rocket ship to every place. So which way do we steer? It's here.
So which way do we steer? This isn't like the video game revolution. It's bigger. It's bigger than cell phones. It's bigger than smartphones. It's been called the biggest thing since the dawn of the PC. It might be bigger than that. The landscape for possibilities compares to the era in which we saw the rise of the Beach Boys and the Beatles, and we're going from the shift to good vibrations. I can't wait to see what our equivalent of that turns out to be and who our Jeff Emmerichs are going to turn out to be. And maybe your contribution is going to be something as simple as moving the mic 3 inches, and it'll affect something as constant and nearly eternal as the music that we all love. Now, Disney is still a constant through the first 3 of the 4 20-year sawteeth, and probably will be for the next 20 years. Is the Disney empire about the glass that makes you think that there are ghosts in the haunted mansion that you can see through? And sorry, spoiler alert, there aren't actually ghosts that you can see through. It's done with glass. Is Disney about the multiplane camera, which lets you pull focus in a cartoon? At the Disney Museum, in one of the rooms that was particularly emphasizing the importance of audio to the Disney empire, there was a beautiful, again, the effect of audio, there was a beautiful recording playing of Walt speaking in that magical voice of his. And he gave this quote about the fine, clean, unspoiled spot down deep in every one of us that maybe the world has made us forget. We are leaving a lasting legacy in the form of sound, music, voice, and immersion. And it's incumbent upon us to put beauty into it and to consider good and evil, if those are meaningful terms to us. Think about the ramifications of what we do and apply our intention towards the positive. Against the background of these giant sawtooth waves, all of this that we do needs to be in service of finding that which does not come and go. Maybe we need a new manifesto, or maybe we can just lean on a rewritten version of the old Manifesto. The new realities are a frontier for music, voice, and sound. Along with big data, the cloud, and the Internet of Things, they will become important in a way that is historically significant for tremendous numbers of opportunities for and different and new ways of listening to, creating, and interacting with audio. As the settlers come to this frontier, it is incumbent upon us pioneers to make sure that this becomes a place that is free and open for sonic expression. It is our intention that the audio in this place be expressive, touching, and made for the sake of the human spirit, not repetitive, imitative, mechanical by convenience, nor needlessly enslaved by styles imposed by fashion or limited machinery. The musical precedents we set and the tools we use and help create, the clothes we wear, why not, the cars we drive, and the things we say should all promote this vision. We're getting very near the end. Now, if you're astute, you've probably noticed that I have this weird thing about songs. Let me explain that. And parenthetically, this is the last slide. And also parenthetically, if you are into writing songs about the MR space, let me know. I'm quite interested in that. So when it seems like everything is in flux, something stays the same. It behooves us as people, as business people, as engineers, as futurists, to pay attention to that. And what is that? The Beatles and Beach Boys definitely touched it. Disney touches it. Team Fat had its little magical piece of it. Magic Leap, too. And it's less like whiz-bang technology. It's past solving the problems of realism or even illusion or even entertainment. And it's more like being with a friend, holding a baby, looking into a loved one's face. And it's not songs, but songs are one pointer to that fine, clean, unspoiled spot down deep in every one of us that maybe the world has made us forget. The 60s produced songs about the radio and dancing and relationships and cars and surfing and phone calls and the highway. And those songs were not just loved, but needed as we adjusted to new and fairly chaotic times, new ways of thinking, new technologies that affected our daily lives. And remember how much of audio engineering came into being just to make that happen. I think that songs, maybe presented in new ways, maybe not, are actually one of the most efficient and beautiful things that we can do to steer this rocket ship to the coolest planets. October 1st, 2016, you are at the first AES-VR, the first group to hear this sketch of this song that was meant to be a prediction about a successful relationship based on long-distance communication and mixed reality. And it turns out, I realized yesterday, perfect for us because I was thinking, sadly, when we get together again on October 1st in 20 years, some of us won't be here. And then I thought, some of us will be on device. So every 20 years when we meet together, wherever we are, and again in 20 years, and the next 20 years, we are going to play this song, and it won't be about novel technology anymore, and it will still be awesome and incredibly credible. And so will you all. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you for this beautiful conference, and I hope you like the song. I will be lip-syncing along with it, even though you can't see me.
Incredible, unbelievable, incredible, unbelievable.
I sit up to the siren sound of something sucking me in. I take another look around and see you just where I am. My friends think I'm crazy, 'cause I'm crazy. I'm crazy for incredibly credible you. I thought that moving all those miles would bring our world to an end. But now it's only you and me, like imaginary friends. Talk to me gentle, 'cause I'm mental for incredibly credible, unbelievably believable you. And I will read to you softly till you fall asleep, my friend, in Neverland. And you will always be in my heart, just as I pretend. up to that other dream. I'm frenzied and manic, 'cause you're authentic and in front of me, lit up like a Christmas tree in June. Incredible.